Genesis. What a long, strange trip it's been, huh? Here we are at the last Torah portion. Thank you, Max. You knew you missed your rabbi. So here we are at the end of the book of Exodus, and really, if we think about it, so much has happened. We had, the creation of the world, the Tower of Babel, Noah, all of the patriarchs and matriarchs, and here we are in the last Torah portion, and it opens with our patriarch Jacob on his deathbed. And we can imagine that he spent some time reflecting, recalling the stories that make up his life. So if you can put yourself in Jacob's shoes, what are the moments of your life that you're recalling? What do we know about Jacob's life? What are those moments that he's going to be laying in that bed thinking, that was part of my life? Anyone? I mean, I'll tell you, I have it written down. You're a rabbi's kid, I know you know this. So, there are many, many things. Jacob's life, as many of you know, is that of rough beginnings. He was caught between two parents who each picked a different favorite child and told them, and pitted them against each other, which leads Jacob to betray his brother, his twin. And he starts with this life of rough beginnings and turns it into a life of second chances. He reconciles with his brother. He births a nation. He was reunited with the son he thought was dead, Joseph. He saw his sons who had experienced a similar rift that he had with his brother, though I would say the Joseph story is a little bit worse than he and Esau. But they reconcile. Their reconciliation leads them to Egypt. They reunite all of Jacob's children, and consequently, they survive the famine that was ravaging their homeland of Canaan. Jacob's story is one of huge regrets, but also one of the incredible opportunities for second chances. Each memory he recalls is a piece of the whole, none on its own making up the whole man. Jacob takes advantage of his last moments to offer blessings to his children, though they may be better described as highlighting each child's major personality trait, and they aren't always flattering. Perhaps he's trying to remind them that they control their own story. They do not have to be defined by one thing. But first, they must stop reinforcing these overpowering characteristics through their actions. But I digress. Anyhow, after blessing each of his children, Jacob makes Joseph vow to bury him with his ancestors in the cave of Machpelah, just south of Jerusalem in Canaan, quite the trek you can imagine from Egypt back then. But Joseph agrees to do so, and then after Jacob dies, our Torah teaches us that Joseph went up to bury his father. It says that with him went all of Pharaoh's officials, the elders of his palace, all of the other elders of Egypt, all of Joseph's household, and his brothers and his father's household. It was a big caravan. It is on this journey that the central story of the brothers' lives resurfaces. Each step they take toward Canaan, and once they reach Canaan, each step they take within the land brings back the sickening realization of that memory. The memory of how they treated Joseph all those years ago, 40 years to be exact. Jacob sent Joseph to find his brothers in the fields, where he finds them in Dothan. As soon as they laid eyes on their father's favorite son approaching them, the brothers decided to exact some revenge. They threw Joseph into a pit, and then they sold him into slavery. They covered up their actions by telling their father that a wild animal had killed his favorite son, Joseph. But here they are, going to bury their father together, and with each step on the journey, their anxiety intensifies. They wondered, perhaps Joseph still bears a grudge and intends to repay us for all the harm that we've inflicted upon him. Perhaps now that our father is gone, he won't feel obligated to be kind to us anymore. Maybe it was all an act. Their unease intensifies even after they make it to their father's resting place. According to Jewish tradition, after Jacob's burial is completed, Joseph does not lead the caravan back south to return to Egypt. Instead, he leads everyone north. And where does he go? To revisit the exact pit that his brothers had thrown him in all of those years ago. Joseph, too, had been recalling their family's history on the trek. We imagine the brothers, I'd say, panicking. Why on earth would Joseph want to return to this place? What might he have in store for us? Regardless, they follow him. They continue along this journey. And then we see a moment, according to rabbinic tradition, that Joseph steps up to the edge of the pit and looks into it. Trembling in fear, the brothers are shocked to hear the words that escape through Joseph's lips. They hear him saying, "Blessed be God who permitted a miracle to come to pass for me here." What? He utters a blessing of all things. This pit, this place of darkness, it's a symbol for all the pain experienced by this one family. In this pit is the pain of Jacob losing his favorite son Joseph, or so he thought. In this pit is the pain of the brothers from being raised to feel less than their dreamer of a brother. In this pit rests the brothers' guilt for succumbing to their unbridled jealousy. In this pit lies Joseph rubbing his special status in his brothers' faces as a child. It represents so much darkness, so many mistakes. And yet, in Joseph's revisiting this place of darkness and standing above it, he can see it for what it became, a starting point, a stop along the way. It's what he did once he left the pit that made him the man he became. It's also how the brothers learned from their mistakes with Joseph, that they were able to care for and protect their youngest brother Benjamin when they first came to Egypt. It's how they were able to become more than just bad people, and instead, good people who did a bad thing. Rabbi Norman J. Cohen offers a creative interpretation, wondering if the pit, or bor in Hebrew, can become a bear, a spring. He asks, can the place of emptiness and pain become a source of healing? Joseph's act of reciting a blessing at the edge of the pit transforms this place of darkness into a symbol of growth. There's a poem often used by psychologists and recovery groups that depicts this journey in another way. It is called An Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters by Portia Nelson. It reads, Chapter 1, I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2, I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend that I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I am in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit, but my eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5, I walk down another street. We all find ourselves falling into the same traps, making the same mistakes, finding ourselves in the same place again and again and again, and even if we walk down another street, there will be a new hole. This knowledge of human nature is what Jewish practice is built upon the opportunity for growth and the idea that there is hope in the future. But it takes work to not be defined by what's happened to us. The pit didn't define Joseph, but he had to acknowledge that it was there in order for him to grow, in order to become more than the pit. In Viktor Frankl's book, Man in Search for Meaning, he states, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. How powerful are we to be able to choose our response? We may find ourselves stuck in the same place time and time again, but eventually, unless we're sticking to the definition of insanity, we realize that we can change the path we walk down. Our stories are powerful reminders of how far we've come. Writer, educator, and social worker Rachel Freed, through her work in legacy consulting, teaches that telling our stories is not an end in itself, but an attempt to release ourselves from them, to evolve and grow beyond them. We tell our stories to transform ourselves, to learn about our history and tell our experiences to transcend them. She continues, to use our stories to make a difference in our world, to broaden our perspective, to see further than normal, to act beyond a story that may have imprisoned or enslaved us once, to live more of our spiritual and earthly potential. Our stories lose their meaning if we do not turn the lessons we learn from them into behaviors we practice in the world in which we live. The pit is just a pit if we don't ever find a way out. This Torah portion is called Vayechi, and he lived. In it, we learn what it means to live. To live is to revisit the darkness in our past, to use our stories as a springboard for growth. As we say at the end of every book of Torah, Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek, be strong, and let us strengthen one another. May we head into 2018 with the strength to peer into the depths, acknowledge how far we've come, and thank God for where we have the ability to go. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova.